Welcome to another episode of Women Investing in Women. My co host Robin and I are absolutely delighted week after week to showcase and amplify the voice and the message of different women who are making an impact in this world and in their own unique way, lifting others up as they chart their course. And we as women know, and research shows, the quality of life for a woman is completely predicated in her network of women and her sisterhood. And how do we build a community of sisterhood that is cross-cultural, cross-national, cross-generational, so that we truly can show up for each other and lift each other up? And together, how can we thrive? And this is going to be an amazing conversation, and I can't wait for Robin to introduce our guest all the way from Australia today.
Absolutely. I am beyond thrilled and totally honored to introduce Dr. Michelle McQuaid. And in addition to having her master's in applied positive psychology, she went through the same program I did several years ago, also has her doctorate. And I know Michelle through an amazing program called the Wellbeing Lab, which she created and ran for many, many years. And in the last year or so, her work and her research has shifted, looking at more towards women and their expectations of themselves and society's expectations of women around, the good girl syndrome. And so I'm really curious, and I was actually part of your original researching, what is this syndrome and how is it manifesting in good ways, bad ways? So I'm wondering what created this shift from, kind of running the well-being lab, which was phenomenal, to then this more a different slice of the pie, so to speak.
Yeah, so Robin and Kaz, great to be with you and your beautiful community of sisterhood. For me, Robin, as you know, I'd spent a lot of years in workplaces and schools and communities helping people understand how do we care for our well-being, even when we're struggling, even when it's hard and we're doing that ebb and flow of life that we all go through. And I love sharing evidence-based ideas, but making them really practical and easy to fit into very busy lives. And that so often we could see when we come into a room and we teach, or we're online, or we write an article and we share these tiny nudges. For many people, they can pick it up and go, oh, I didn't know that about the science or how we work as human beings. And yep, that's a really practical small thing I want to try in my life. And then we go back, weeks, months later and go, well, how's that going for you? The data nerd in me has to know. And for many people, they were able to apply it, but not stick with it consistently. And we kept scratching the surface, like what made it hard to stick with? Because everybody we'd talked to about this work was like, I want to care for my well-being. I want to put myself first more. I know I need to look after myself and fit my own oxygen mask so I can be who I want to be for everybody else I love around me. And yet most consistently, we struggle. I think everybody listening to this will have struggled at some time to prioritize their own well-being. And when we got underneath, well, what was causing that? Often the most common thing we'd hear is there's not enough time. And I get that. I know what it is to be busy and raising families and working jobs and studying and all those good things we fill our lives with. And we also choose what we prioritize to some degree. Yeah, we might have kids that need feeding, don't get a choice in that priority. But some of the time in our day, we get to choose to put somewhere. So where do we put it and why? And what we kept finding coming up, particularly for women as the barrier was, well, I need to be making sure I'm performing perfectly, that I've got everything prepared for work. In fact, I've over-prepared it. I've thought of every other scenario that could go on here. Or I've got my home looking perfect. Or the kids have got the perfect thing for the bake day sale. A lot of pleasing others. I can't set healthy boundaries for myself because people would think I was selfish or I was being indulgent. and the need to protect other people. And I think we saw this through the Me Too movement and other things where often as women, we've silenced what is true for us. We're often doing this emotional work for other people around us, whether they want us to or not. And we're holding a lot of that stuff inside. And all of that, the performing perfectly, the pleasing everyone, the protecting others takes a lot of energy. And so when we started asking, well, why are we doing this? Like, if you're doing this to the point of exhaustion and burnout, which is often what we were seeing coming up in the data, you're doing this to the point where it's actually not good for you. Why do we keep doing it? And as we unpacked all of that, we found in that research session that you joined us with, Robin, and others, that often at very early ages in life, but by the time we're about 11, many of us as women have learned that there are certain expectations that society has of us, and that we earn love by fulfilling those expectations. And so this really kind of turned on all the light bulbs in my brain, Robin, for my own lived experience as to where I had struggled with in life, but also for the incredible women I saw all around me who were running themselves ragged and stretching themselves, you know, to breaking point, trying to be who everybody else expected them to be, with very little capacity left to be who they needed to be. And it was making us sick in so many different ways.
I love where you took this conversation, Michelle. We started with how women have this good girl syndrome, but you also talked about the pressures and how from childhood, this is actually cultivated and ingrained. And what strikes me in this is two things. One, it is cultural. And two, it is mothers who are doing this to daughters, and sisters and girlfriends who are doing it to the other girls and women. So this is a female perpetuated scenario, and we get to stand in our own power and break that cycle. Why do mothers who are struggling then pass on this generational curse to their daughters and hold them to that same impossible standards? What makes them continue to have blinders on while they're working on themselves?
Yeah, so Cass, this was a question that fascinated me because it was definitely my mother, bless her, who taught me the importance of being a good girl. It wasn't just her, though. Absolutely, mothers, sisters, friends, we absolutely perpetuate this with each other. And Cass, to your point, I'll share in a moment why the research found we are the ones that break each other free. And we also just want to acknowledge that there is a wider world around us that benefits from us being good girls. So mothers, Cass, to your first question, often teach us this to try to keep us safe, right? The reality is it's only been 50 years in countries like America and Australia, the United Kingdom, Canada, that women could have their own bank accounts without a father or a husband having to sign for them. So there's not that long really in the world since our safety for the most basic things of food and shelter depended on us appealing to a man, be that again our fathers, our brothers, our husbands, to look after us, because without their say-so, it was very difficult for us to have much form of independence. And so again, not that long since women were conditioned to be good girls in order to attract good husbands who would supposedly look after us and keep us safe. And so 50 years, really, again, we're trying to break free from these ideas into this new world in which we can now have our own bank accounts. I know that's not true for women still in so many countries in this world, but we're trying to shake off something that's been very institutionalized. So yes, our mothers often give it to us, hoping to keep us safe, and the world around us tends to have this surround sound echo that if we are good, we will earn love and we will be safe and cared for. And we see this playing out in our media. For me as a little girl, there was a little golden book I chose when I was about 5 years old, and it was the story of the good little, bad little girl. And in this little storybook, the good little girl was quiet and neat and tidy and didn't eat too much. The bad little girl was loud and messy and interrupted and was greedy. And the end of the story was that she found the good little girl and the bad little girl were the same little girl, but if she made the good little girl grow taller and taller and the bad little girl smaller and smaller, then she would be happy and loved. And my mother, who was a feminist at the time, read me this story like night after night, bless her, without perhaps seeing the conditioning that it was in there. As a little girl, I wanted the story read because I wanted to know how to be good and to earn people's love. At school, when we complied, we got gold stars. When we didn't, we were made to stand in the corner of shame or outside in the corridor. Often in our faith communities, we've been encouraged to be good girls. Often in our society and governance, again, there's certainly countries in the world still today where if I am not a good girl, I can face all sorts of horrible consequences. So again, I think our mothers, yes, our sisters, for each other as friends, we do echo this conditioning for each other. I think you only have to go on Instagram to still see this in action right now. And we are also in a wider world where patriarchy and consumerism and other systems around us benefit from keeping us this way. But Cass, the thing that I loved in the research was that when women talked about how did they break free, so about 65% of women today still say, yep, I feel this need to conform to these good girl expectations. Interestingly, younger women, more likely to say yes, 76% of them, versus older women. Once we get over 65, just under half of us are feeling like, I still have to be good. But the thing that broke any of us free was seeing the role modeling and mentoring of other women, our other sisters, going, what the heck? I'm not doing this. What about on my terms and for my benefit as well as yours, and not always at my cost?
Yeah. Wow, this is really fascinating. I mean, this is we could go on for hours about this. Why in your book the little bad girl. So why is it that jumping around and being loud and noisy, why was that defined as being bad? What has been rattling around in my brain for many days, anticipating this this conversation, is I am of the generation where the phrase good girl, well, if you weren't a good girl, you were out sleeping around, getting drunk every weekend and doing drugs. Okay.
You're a bad girl. There was only two ways this was going, Robin.
And on the other, so I have this kind of image. On the other image is my therapist was sharing how when she was 4 years old, and she had these little new white patent leather shoes to wear to church. And when she got home from church, she was so proud of herself that she had not scruffed her shoes. And then she shared, it is so beyond age inappropriate to expect a 4-year-old to not scruff their shoes. And so I'm holding these two things that are kind of exploding in my brain. Over here you have the good girl, the not good girl, sleeping around, getting drunk every weekend, doing drugs. And over here, completely inappropriate expectations of being good. So how do you kind of balance this or explain or integrate this unhealthiness of being good and the healthy being good and then the not healthy being good?
Yeah, so I think our brains are wired to crave simplicity. We like it when the world makes sense, all the bits of the puzzles fit in their places. And one of the downsides of that is in our search for simplicity, we tend to make things far more black and white than they need to be. So little like my little golden book, there was the good little girl and the bad little girl. Or Robin, to your example, there was the good girl, not scuffing her white shoes at 4 years old. And then there was the other, bad girl or whatever we like to think of her, who's running around, loose morals, drinking, doing drugs, things that we shouldn't do, right? The rebel, if we like it that way. And so often what we've done is put us in either one category or the other, but not allowed for the human complexity of which we all are, which is perfectly imperfect, right? Nature made us perfectly imperfect so that we could learn and grow, adapt and evolve as the world around us and within each of us keeps changing. And so really almost none of us are all one way or the other way. We can think of this as a continuum of behavior. It's probably more effective than I'm an either or. And then that allows us the space to be and. And that's what we're really finding in our research with women is none of us are good all of the time, and none of us are whatever the alternative is. We asked, what is the positive alternative to being a good girl in our research? And it was so fascinating. Unlike with the women, the moment we said good girl, everybody was able to start relating to what that was. But the positive alternative is not so clear for us. And this is problematic because when we don't have language to describe what the positive alternative is, then it's hard to imagine being it or connecting around it in our sisterhood of community. And so what the women came up with in our research anyway, they talked about it as being uniquely you. And uniquely you just meant that I was honoring what was true to me rather than feeling the need to conform to whom everybody else expected me to be. And we would still here advocate for the and, right? Again, it's not a problem being a good girl, trying to perform perfectly or please others or protect everybody, provided that that is not burning you out or doing harm to you and others in the process. Not least because if it is doing those things, it's very difficult to sustain. And that's what we see in our research. Often for women, by the time they're coming to their mid-30s, early 40s, they're like, oh my goodness, I cannot keep up with this. There has to be a different way. And then we often start to hear what's always been there, this calling to be uniquely you, to be more integrated and aligned to who we are, to what we value, not just others' expectations of who we're meant to be. And what the women often talked about in the research, Robin, you might recall, is not just this feeling of exhaustion and overwhelm and burnout, but this feeling of resentment as to what everybody else was expecting of me, and this feeling of being lost, like I lost my sense of who I am and how I want to be in this world. And that's a very hard way for any of us to live, never mind to have a hope of being able to thrive. So I think about it as a continuum. I like the good girl kind of at one end and my uniquely me or whatever works for you at the other end. And just knowing that in different situations for different outcomes, I get to choose how I show up along that continuum. And the way to figure that out that we found helpful in the research is to just start asking ourselves, on whose terms and for whose benefit am I living my wild and precious life? And the answer to that is really ever all just mine, only my terms, only my benefit, because we are social creatures and we need to live in community. So the answer is more likely to be a bit of me and a bit of you, but it also can't always be at my cost, because when it is constantly at my cost is where it becomes completely unsustainable.
I appreciate you explaining the continuum and the need to find that balance, and each person has to find their balance. And you're talking purely, and you gave the examples of UK and Australia and the US. So I am trying to apply it to the part of the world I come from. I'm Sri Lankan. Yeah. And we don't grow up, we don't raise our daughters in a good girl, bad girl environment, because we come from a society where women are empowered, oldest daughter is raised to be the head of the household. And women are educated and we get jobs. And when we get married, we already have a home and our husband moves into our home. And we've been forever the breadwinners and the rule makers in the house. Actually, to this day, the woman carries the keys to the kitchen, the safe, and the house in her sari, right? Mm-hmm. In India, it's the polar opposite, but Sri Lanka has maintained the original Indus Valley civilization tradition. So I am coming from a mindset of every daughter is a goddess. Mm-hmm. She embodies the energy of the goddess, and that energy is wisdom, it is wealth, it is courage. And when that is harnessed right, and when it's put to its positive use, then it's all coming from the place of that power. And when anybody tries to stifle that power, then that power can rise up and can destroy that what it's preventing the energy to remain in its place of balance. So we are taught that it's okay to be angry. It is okay to call people out, and it's okay to show that it is causing dissonance in your place of power, and you can push back because your feminine energy is the energy of creation, and anything that destroys creation, you can destroy to recreate in a constructive way. So I was raised in that culture. And so it's allowed me to thrive in the Western world because I didn't come with all these barriers, right? So I'm curious, as you do the study and you're studying the Western world, is there any of this that can be applied to some of the traditions that are different? Everybody talks about the part of the world that doesn't have the freedoms the Western world has, but what about the part of the world that has far more freedom for perpetuity than the West has ever had? And how does the study apply?
I love that, Kaz, and thank you so much for sharing that perspective. And again, at both sides of that, for women in Sri Lanka who are, I love that, the divine goddess that we are honoring within each of us. And then also for women in other countries around the world where breaking free from these good girl expectations, again, can actually be a very serious political and legal matter with horrible consequences. And so I just want to, again, acknowledge the full spectrum of experience. And again, whether we identify as women or in other ways, but these ideas resonate with us. The interesting thing, and Cass, I'm curious from your experience as a Sri Lankan woman, whether this holds true or not. In the research where we were looking at, when people are breaking free, when women are breaking free to be more uniquely you, what are the skills that they're using that makes that possible? We absolutely saw the mentoring and role modeling of other women were one of the big things that made that possibility even like, oh, I could, maybe will I? But secondly, then the skills that they were using to embody that uniquely you state were three that kept coming up pretty consistently. One was self-compassion. So are we being that wise and kind friend to ourselves rather than that judgmental inner critic that's beating ourselves up? So Kaz, I don't know, when we're sort of embodying that divine goddess in Sri Lanka, where self-criticism and self-compassion plays, if at all. The second one was around secure attachment to self. So this was trusting myself that I will show up for me, I will advocate for me, I will not abandon myself, I will set healthy boundaries around what I need. So again, this belief, as the divine goddess may have, I would imagine, Cass, around I am worthy. I am worthy of showing up for and advocating for. And then the third skill was around self-leadership. And here again, understanding out of some of the internal family systems therapy work, at least in the West, around that there are lots of different parts of me. And sometimes those parts of me can be in conflict. There's a people pleaser part that wants to clean the whole house before you come to visit, Cass and Robin. And then there's another sort of part of me that's like, oh, for goodness sake, just let it go and don't be so perfect. And, you know, it'll be Cass and Robin, they'll be relieved because then they'll know I won't expect anything when I go to their houses either. And so again, the internal family systems tool, at least in the West, for some of that self-leadership of making peace with those different parts that might be war inside of us. Cass, I think about each morning, I start my day thinking about some of the divine goddesses like Kali and Durga and Saraswati and others that I call in as different parts of energy that I want to carry with me through that day for my self-leadership. But Cass, I'm curious whether any of those skills, self-compassion, secure attachment to self, that self-leadership, whether that resonates for you and your experience as a Sri Lankan woman, or whether there are other skills that show up that you think particularly helps you stay in that uniquely you goddess alignment.
No, that is a very, very relevant question. So what we are taught from childhood, whether you're a boy or a girl, is the most important relationship you are going to have is with the divine within you. Our soul is the divine. We don't take a last name.
Yeah.
Body came from mother and father, but I am the soul. The soul belongs to the maker, and my soul is divine. So the divine is inside me, and I honor the divine. And therefore, the most important relationship I am going to have is with the divine within me. And so what my mouth utters, what my mind thinks, my body is the temple because the altar is my soul. Yeah. And so everything around dharma, the sacred duty, and how you live your life and you fulfill your sacred duty. So your purpose you look for your purpose as you build a relationship with your divine, and then how the choice and consequences as you live your dharma is the karma, right? So there is no good or bad, and you understand that if you made a mistake, that's okay. It's part of learning. In the modern world, we call continuous improvement, right? So my soul is on a continuous improvement journey. And if we make a mistake, we learn from it, because that's what the journey is about. And all I have to do is at all times maintain the relationship with the divine within me, because what is sacred is already there. And actually, my name is literally that in its meaning. Whatever I need in my life is already inside of me. All I need to do is reach inside and draw from within, because I am part of that divine. So the whole concept is different.
I think there's such wisdom in that. And what a beautiful starting place, Kaz, to grow up from at an early age, knowing that that divine is inside of us, and how do we honor and stay aligned to that. And I love, Kaz, that you mentioned that's true for both women and for men, boys and girls. And I think, you know, the alternative we see, certainly in more Western countries, is that as much as girls get groomed to be good from an early age, guys get groomed to be tough or real men. And those expectations play out in all sorts of challenging ways for our men as they grow up. What's interesting in the research we're finding, Cass, again, back to that, honoring the divine within each of us, whether that's with those skills of self-compassion and secure attachment and self-leadership, or our dharma and our karma and knowing this is where we are, is that those things aren't gender specific. So we're perhaps learning the hard way, Cass, to come back to what you learn in Sri Lanka right from an early age, to understand that the divine is within each of us, and the opportunity is to keep learning how best to honor that and share it into the world each day.
Wow, this has been an absolutely fantastic conversation, and I knew it would be. I knew it would be. Michelle, please tell please tell our audience how people can get a hold of you so they can learn more about your research and your work. And then, do you have a final golden nugget before Cass wraps this up?
Yeah, so head on over to thegoodgirlgamechangers.com, or you can just Google Dr. Michelle McQuaid and we'll pop up there. You'll find your way to us. And I think, yeah, for me, the golden nugget is just remembering that we are each made perfectly imperfect, so that we can learn and grow, adapt and evolve throughout this life. And so rather than having our sights set so much on good or bad, right or wrong, success or failure, to perhaps embrace that it is all just learning, and to love each other as best we can along that path.
Thank you so much, Michelle. This has been an absolutely riveting and truly inspiring conversation. So thank you. Thank you for engaging in this. Thank you for sharing your research and your wisdom with us. And Robin, as always, it's an absolute delight to have these conversations week after week. And to our audience out there, remember, you get to live this one life on your terms. And why label yourself as good or bad? Just take charge and own your power. Come from your place of power. And what I remind myself every day is Mother Nature is the best teacher. Walk out there every evening and look up at the moon. Between the new moon and the full moon, it takes different forms every day, 28-day cycles, just like the female cycle. And it's a reminder for us that it doesn't matter what stage we're in. We're each whole, we're each uniquely bright, and we are there to fulfill our purpose. And just embrace what the moon is teaching us and live your life as a whole person. Love and live and experience everything that life has given us as a gift. And remember, you're each a goddess. You don't need to be a princess. You don't need to be a good girl or a bad girl. You are a goddess.